Hey there, viewers. Today we're cutting through the gossip fog around Beyonce, her kids, and the Diddy headlines. We'll break down what's fact, what's pure speculation, and why the quiet moves in her world might be telling you more than the loudest rumors ever could. Chapter 1. The Quiet Tell. When silence becomes the loudest line in a set list. I've always been the kind of person who notices the little things before the big ones. Maybe it comes from working in hospitality for years, where reading a room is part of the job. You learn how to spot who's about to ask for the check before they even raise their hand. You can tell when a couple's argument is about to start just by the way their shoulders shift. And when it comes to celebrities, it's not always the flashy headlines that give away the real story. It's the spaces between them, the silences, the absences, the things they don't do. That's why when this whole Diddy situation started filling up my feed, I didn't just look at the articles or the TV segments. I started paying attention to Beyonce's family in a different way. Not the gossip pieces, those are easy to find, but the way her world seemed to keep moving with a certain careful rhythm. It's strange how, when one corner of the entertainment world is falling apart, another corner goes quiet. Not the kind of quiet where nothing's happening. More like the kind where you can tell everything is happening behind closed doors. The internet has been spinning this idea lately that Beyonce's kids somehow confirmed something about what Diddy did to her. At first, I rolled my eyes. How could children who barely appear in public confirm anything? But then I started noticing the way people online were piecing it together, not from interviews or leaked documents, but from patterns. Who was in the audience at certain shows, which tour stops had family cameos and which didn't, whether the set list stayed the same or skipped certain songs. The theory isn't about what's said, it's about what's missing. Oh, it's certainly possible. There's this unwritten rule in the Knowles-Carter household, one Beyonce has more or less spelled out over the years in little ways. The family is not part of the brand. Sure, there are exceptions. Blue Ivy's occasional stage appearances during the Renaissance tour were everywhere online, but those were curated moments. Controlled lighting, pre-approved choreography, no sudden close-ups unless Beyonce allowed them. When Beyonce closely thought it about belonging, he made it into this little box in his head, and he stood by that limit, a part of something big. No one's walking in on this family by accident. If we see something, it's because they wanted us to see it. It's been like this for years. No daily updates on Instagram showing the kids at home, no messy live streams where a stray comment slips out. Even behind-the-scenes footage is edited so tightly that you could watch a 20-minute documentary and still have no clue what a normal breakfast looks like in their house. They've built this wall, and it works. When you're on the outside of that wall, any small change on the inside looks huge. That's what these online theories are feeding on. They take a tiny thing, like Rumi and Sir not being spotted at the Houston show when they were at the Los Angeles one, and turn it into a story. Or they'll notice that Blue didn't walk out during a certain segment of the set she usually joins, and suddenly that's confirmation of a behind-the-scenes rift. It's the same pattern you see in fan forums about sports teams or royal families. If the routine changes, people assume there's a reason, and the reason must be dramatic. And right now, the drama everyone's watching is Diddy. His legal reality is loud. Federal raids, court appearances, charges that make headlines in big black letters. The March 25, 2024 raids by Homeland Security investigations were all over Reuters and The Guardian within hours. Photographs of agents at the gates of his Los Angeles property, video clips from Miami, the kind of news cycle you can't hide from. Every update is public, every court date gets logged. But Beyonce's world? Quiet. Almost too quiet if you believe the online chatter. There's no public comment from her, no cryptic posts, no indirect shade in a performance. She's still showing up to the things she's booked for, still releasing and promoting work, but there's a gap where the more casual, family-centered content might be. For most people, that gap wouldn't even register. For her fans, it's a flashing neon sign. I think part of the reason the kids confirmed it theory is spreading is because people don't know how to handle the difference between Diddy's noise and Beyonce's quiet. When one side of the equation is constant headlines and the other side is almost nothing, the human brain fills in the blanks. And in the age of TikTok breakdowns and Instagram story clues, those blanks get filled with whatever narrative gets the most likes. It's not just about whether the kids are physically seen at events. People track the set lists like they're stock charts. Did she swap out a song with a reference that could be tied, however loosely, to the allegations swirling around Diddy? Did she skip a segment where she usually brings blue on stage? Did she end the show without her usual final bow? Each change, no matter how small, becomes a potential piece of the puzzle in some Reddit thread. I've read enough of those threads to know they're often wrong. Sometimes the change is just logistics. Sometimes it's a technical glitch. Sometimes it's nothing more than a personal choice on the day. But when the audience is primed to expect a hidden message, even coincidence feels like proof. And the thing is, this isn't just random overthinking. Beyoncé's control over her image is so tight that fans know she doesn't make onstage choices by accident. So when something is different, they can't help but assume it's deliberate. That's the double-edged sword of being as meticulous as she is. Everything you do feels like a statement. And I don't pretend to know what's going on inside her house. None of us do. But I do know that her long-standing house rule about keeping her kids' lives separate from her public career hasn't changed. It's the reason this theory is so easy to twist, because when you don't have real access, every scrap of public information gets magnified. And with Diddy's legal mess dominating entertainment news, people are looking for any connection they can find, even if it's built on sand. There's a side-by-side that keeps popping into my head. On one side, you've got Diddy's timeline since March 25, 2024. Raids, lawyers, court appearances, denied bail. On the other side, you've got the Knowles Carter timeline, which is basically tour stops, album promotions, and that's it. No visible disruptions, no public blow-ups, no changes in the schedule that can be confirmed as related to any of this. But in the spaces between, people think they see a signal. If I had to guess, I'd say that's the point. When someone else's scandal is making noise, the smartest move is to turn your own volume down. No extra statements, no public reactions, just stick to the plan and let the news cycle eat itself. And in a strange way, that makes the silence the loudest thing of all. Because silence can't be misquoted, but it can be interpreted. And right now, the interpretations are running wild. So here we are, one world that's loud enough to be heard across the globe and another that's so quiet it echoes. And in that echo, people are hearing whatever they want to hear. Some say it's fear, some say it's strategy, some say it's confirmation. I say it's just the same rule Beyoncé's lived by for years. Family is family, business is business, and the two don't mix in public. But I'm not naive. I know how these things work. This story isn't going to fade quietly. The louder Diddy's headlines get, the more people will look for signs in Beyoncé's life, even in her children's appearances or absences. And every time she chooses not to give them a direct answer, they'll take that as an answer in itself. That's the game, whether she wants to play it or not. By courts versus feeds. What's actually on the record about Diddy? I'm not a lawyer. I've never even sat inside a courtroom unless you count jury duty, and even then I didn't get picked. But I do know this. Before you start believing every rumor you see on social media, you've got to understand what's actually on the record. I've watched enough people twist half-truths into entire stories to know that once the internet gets hold of something, it can become unrecognizable in a matter of hours. That's why I wanted to slow down and set the floor here. No speculation, no guesswork, just the paper trail. The part of this story that's impossible to ignore starts on March 25, 2024. That's the day federal agents from Homeland Security Investigations carried out raids on two of Sean Diddy Combs' properties, one in Los Angeles and one in Miami. You probably remember the images even if you didn't read the articles. Black SUVs outside gated driveways, agents in tactical vests walking in and out of front gates, news choppers hovering overhead. Reuters ran a full piece that day, and The Guardian had their own coverage within hours. The words they used were careful. They didn't call him guilty, and they didn't say the raids proved the allegations against him, because that's not how it works. A raid means there's a search warrant. A search warrant means a judge found probable cause to believe there's evidence of a crime at that location. But probable cause is not proof beyond a reasonable doubt. It's not a conviction. It's not even a charge on its own. It's basically a legal permission slip for investigators to go in and look. That's it. The headlines might have been loud, but legally this was the beginning of a process, not the end of one. The agencies involved made statements that were just as cautious. Homeland Security Investigations confirmed the searches, but didn't lay out every detail of what they were looking for. That's standard. They keep things tight to protect the investigation and, in some cases, to avoid tipping off other people who might be connected. The truth is, when you're on the outside looking in, a raid tells you one thing for sure. The government is taking something seriously enough to go through a judge to get inside someone's property. Everything after that is a waiting game. That waiting game stretched for months, but it eventually led to something concrete: federal charges. Now, here's where the public record gets messy, because a lot of people only read the first wave of charges and never follow the updates. By the time we got to 2025, Diddy's legal picture had shifted. The most severe counts, racketeering and sex trafficking, were not sustained by the jury, but that didn't mean he walked away free. He was convicted on 2 federal counts related to prostitution. Those convictions carry their own weight. They're not small charges, and they're not the kind of thing you can brush off. And because of them, his life right now looks very different. He's been in custody since before the verdict, and every time his lawyers have asked for bail, the answer has been no. Repeated denials. No release pending sentencing. That sentencing date is set for October 3rd, 2025. Until then, he sits in federal custody, waiting to hear exactly how many years he's going to serve. The Washington Post did a clean job of summarizing this in one of their updates, sticking to the facts without leaning into the more salacious details. It's the kind of reporting I trust. Names, dates, charges, verdicts, without speculation about things that aren't in the record. Because here's the truth. When you strip away the opinion pieces and the talk shows, the legal trail is actually pretty short. Raids, charges, trial, partial acquittal, conviction on 2 counts, sentencing in October. That's the backbone of the story. Everything else is noise layered on top. But that's not where Beyonce's name first got dragged into this. That started with something else entirely. A civil lawsuit filed in October 2024 that named both Diddy and Jay-Z. The claim was serious, an alleged assault from the year 2000. It was the kind of allegation that on paper makes your stomach turn. But civil suits aren't criminal charges. They're a different lane altogether. You don't need the same level of proof to file one, and they can be dropped or settled without any finding of guilt. And that's exactly what happened here. By February 2025, the case was voluntarily dismissed with prejudice. That's an important phrase, because it means the person who filed it can't come back and refile the same claim later. Once it's with prejudice, that door is legally closed. Reuters reported the dismissal. ABC News, The Washington Post, and Forbes all covered the follow-up, and they all included the same key detail. There had been inconsistencies in the accuser's statements. and an audio recording came to light that undercut part of her claim against Jay-Z. The exact contents of that recording weren't spelled out in every article, but the case was over, and it wasn't ending in the accuser's favor. Still, for the months in between filing and dismissal, Beyonce's name got pulled into the conversation whether she liked it or not. People online made leaps, from Jay-Z is named to Beyonce must be involved to what about the kids? That's how fast association spreads in this kind of news cycle. It doesn't matter if the claim falls apart later. The headline from the filing sticks in people's minds. That's why Beyonce and Jay-Z's legal team stepped in when a certain televised conversation crossed the line. During a Piers Morgan segment, some of the guests started tossing around unverified claims that painted both of them in an ugly light. Their attorney responded publicly, rejecting the comparisons outright and calling the statements false. Online covered that legal pushback in detail, quoting the attorney and making it clear that they were willing to draw boundaries when speculation turned into defamation. And this is where I think a lot of people lose the thread, because when you line it all up, the raids, the charges, the verdict, the sentencing date, the dismissed civil suit, the legal pushback, there's still nothing credible tying Diddy to Beyonce's children. Not in court documents, not in police reports, not in reputable media. Legally, the linkage is zero. But that's not how it feels when you live in the feeds. In the feeds, a dismissed civil suit doesn't get as much traction as a filed one. A legal rebuttal doesn't trend as long as a viral rumor, and the official timeline is always fighting for space against the latest TikTok theory. That's why I wanted to set this foundation before we go anywhere near the speculation side. If you know what's actually in the public record, it's a lot easier to see when something doesn't belong there. So here's the reality. Diddy's legal troubles are real and they're serious. They involve raids, charges, and convictions that will change the course of his life. Jay-Z was pulled into one of those side currents through a civil suit, but that case is closed and can't be reopened. Beyonce's only involvement is by association, and even that is more about media perception than legal fact. And as for the kids, there is no on-record connection. None. Which means whatever people think they've confirmed isn't coming from the courts. It's coming from the feeds. Chapter 3. How fans read a family. Appearances, absences, and the ritual of routine. I'd never been one of those people who think they can read a celebrity like an open book, but I've been around enough friends who try, and when it comes to Beyonce's family, especially her kids, I've noticed this habit fans have. Like they've built an entire decoder ring out of Instagram posts, concert footage, and blurry fan cam clips. They see a single appearance and break it down like they're investigating a crime scene. They see an absence and treat it like a hidden message. The clearest example of this has been Blue Ivy. During the Renaissance tour, her appearances on stage became their own kind of pop culture moment. It started small. One night she joined her mom for a dance segment, and fans lost their minds. It wasn't just, oh, that's sweet, she's on stage with her mom. People zoomed in on her expressions, analyzed her moves, compared her confidence from night to night. Facebook pages and fan accounts shared side-by-side clips showing her growth as a performer over the tour. Mainstream outlets even picked it up, celebrating her poise and talent. The thing is, every one of those moments was carefully managed. Blue didn't just wander into rehearsals and ask to go on stage. This was planned, choreographed, and approved. And when she wasn't there, that was a decision too. But to fans watching from the outside, every change in that pattern felt like a clue. If she danced with more energy, they'd say she must be happy. If she looked a little tired, they'd say something must be going on behind the scenes. If she didn't appear at all, they'd start wondering why. And lately, those why questions are getting tied to Diddy's name, whether it makes sense or not. Now we're in a different era, Beyonce's Cowboy Carter period, and the kid visibility is different. Not gone, just changed. Some of that simple reality. Blue's older now. She's got her own schedule, her own friends, and probably more school responsibilities than any of us are thinking about when we're scrolling through tour clips. The twins, Rumi and Sir, are still young enough that school and routine take priority. Not every city on a tour is worth flying across the country for when you've got class the next morning. But that's not as exciting as saying their absence confirms a secret feud or scandal. So the internet tends to skip over the boring answer. In Liverpool, the answer. Beyonce has talked before about keeping her kids' lives as normal as possible. In interviews with outlets like The Independent and Essence, she's been clear about drawing a line between her work and her family. She doesn't flood social media with their personal moments. She doesn't stage casual paparazzi walks. And she doesn't treat them like part of her marketing plan. That's not an accident. It's a philosophy. She's debranded her private life as much as a global superstar possibly can. And when you operate like that, you can't be surprised when people start trying to read between the lines. The fan logic ladder always works the same way. It starts with something small. Maybe Blue isn't at a show she was expected to be at. Then it turns into, why not? From there it's, well, Beyonce is under fire by association because of the Diddy news. Then maybe that's connected. And before you know it, a completely ordinary absence turns into confirmation of something that has zero evidence behind it. But if you step back and actually apply Occam's razor, the idea that the simplest explanation is usually the right one, it collapses. 9 times out of 10, the answer isn't a secret scandal. It's school, or rehearsals, or just not wanting to be in the spotlight that night. If I could put it in a graphic, I'd call it green room versus classroom. On one side, you've got the glam, the rehearsals, the choreography, the roar of the crowd. On the other side, you've got homework, early mornings, and the reality of being a kid. The confirmation fans think they see is usually just calendar math. If a show is in the middle of the week and halfway across the country, odds are the kids are in the classroom, not the green room. No secret code, no hidden message. But I get it. When you care about an artist, you start looking for meaning in every little thing they do. And when there's a big scandal elsewhere in their circle, like Diddy's legal mess, you start connecting dots that were never part of the same picture. The problem is, those dots often lead nowhere. And when the evidence is just whether or not a kid showed up at a concert, you've got to ask yourself if you're really learning anything at all. The truth is, Beyonce's routine with her kids hasn't actually changed much. What's changed is the lens people are looking through. Before, a skipped appearance might have been chalked up to rest or school. Now, it's instantly linked to whatever's in the headlines. That says more about the audience than it does about her family. And until people can separate routine from rumor, the decoder ring will keep spinning out the same kind of stories. Stories that sound juicy but fall apart the second you step back and look at the whole picture. The rumor conveyor belt, from Reddit to Reels to your group chat. I've seen how rumors move online, and it's never in a straight line. They don't just pop up fully formed. They travel. They start as a throwaway comment somewhere quiet and then get picked up, repackaged and passed along until they barely resemble the original thing. By the time they land in your group chat, they've been through so many filters that you can't tell what's fact and what's been added for drama. And in this whole Beyonce, Jay-Z, Diddy conversation, I've watched that conveyor belt run at full speed. It usually starts in a low-traffic space. Maybe a Reddit thread, maybe a small Facebook group, maybe a comment section under a random Instagram post. Someone will share something they heard or claim they saw, without anything to back it up. The tone is always casual, like they're just sharing tea, and not throwing out a potentially damaging claim. That's the seed, and even if the original post doesn't get huge traction, someone's going to screenshot it. The next stop is the YouTube essay crowd. This is where the rumor gets dressed up. Now, it's not just a comment, it's a deep dive with a title like The Truth About What's Really Going On with Beyonce and Diddy. They'll take that unverified claim and build a 20-minute video around it, mixing in a bunch of unrelated clips to make it look like there's a bigger pattern. The person making the video might even throw in a disclaimer, "This is just my opinion," but the damage is already done because it's being presented like an investigation. From there, it gets chopped into bite-sized pieces for Reels and TikTok. Now you've got a 30-second clip, maybe with dramatic background music, a headline pasted across the screen, and a voiceover summarizing the claim in the most shocking way possible. No source link, no context, just the most clickable version of the story. And because these clips are short, people watch them all the way through, which makes the algorithm push them even harder. The next step is X, where the screenshot culture takes over. Someone grabs a frame from the video, writes a one-sentence caption that sounds definitive, and posts it without a link. By this point, the rumor's origin is gone. All you've got is a floating claim with no proof, but it's spreading like wildfire because it fits into whatever narrative people already believe. And the last stage is the DMs. The "my cousin works security" messages. That's where someone in your contacts sends you the rumor as if it's now an inside scoop, even though it's just the same recycled story that's been moving down the conveyor belt all week. 3 big rumors have been riding that belt lately when it comes to this situation. The first is the concert execution story, the claim that Diddy's twins were asked to leave a Beyonce show. I've seen it repeated so many times that some people talk about it like it's confirmed history. But the truth? There's no reputable outlet, not the Washington Post, not any credible entertainment news site that has reported it. No photos, no statements from the venue, no eyewitness accounts from named sources. Just a viral thumbnail and a story that people decided to remember as fact. Status unverified. The second rumor bucket is the secret network theory. This one claims there's a hidden web of moguls, coded references in Beyonce's set design, and some sort of long-standing alliance that ties her to everything Diddy's accused of. It's the kind of thing you see mostly in long YouTube essays or speculative TikToks. And unless you've got primary reporting from somewhere like Forbes or another major outlet, it's all just guesswork. The problem is, it's presented with a tone that makes people feel like they've uncovered something forbidden. But the reality? Status. Speculation. The third is what I think of as cross-contamination claims. This is when people say, well, Jay-Z was named in that civil suit with Diddy, so Beyonce's family must be involved somehow. This one is easier to fact-check because we know what happened. The suit was voluntarily dismissed with prejudice in February 2025, which means it can't be refiled. Reuters, The Washington Post, and E! Online all reported on it, and the inconsistencies in the accuser's statements were documented. Beyonce and Jay-Z's attorney even went on record to shut down televised rumors. So this one? Status refuted? If you strip away the drama and run each of these through what I call the fact filter, they start to look very different. First question, source? Is it coming from a primary outlet or an actual court filing? Second, evidence. Are there documents, videos, or first-hand named sources? Third, corroboration. Has more than one reputable outlet reported it? If the answer to any of those is no, then you've got to admit you're dealing with something unverified, with no evidence or outright misleading. And that's the part people skip. They see something once, maybe twice, and it feels true. But the truth isn't about how many times you've seen it. It's about whether it can stand up to that filter. In this case, most of what's moving through the conveyor belt doesn't make it past the first question. The thing is, once you understand how the belt works, you can't unsee it. You start spotting the same recycled claims everywhere. You recognize the screenshots from that same YouTube video. You hear the same phrases in every TikTok voiceover. It stops feeling like 100 separate confirmations and starts looking like what it really is, one unverified story doing laps around the internet. And if you know the difference between feeds and facts, you're a lot harder to fool. Chapter 5. ER in a Firestorm. If you really pay attention to how Beyonce moves during a public storm, you start to notice a pattern. It's not random, and it's definitely not reactive in the way most celebrities get when they're under pressure. She's not hopping online to post a clapback thread, and she's not turning her shows into soapboxes for whatever's in the news. When the room gets smoky, she's already got a playbook, and it's one that keeps her family out of the crossfire. One of the clearest examples of this was the Piers Morgan segment that brought Jaguar Wright into the conversation. In that broadcast, claims were made that reached straight into Beyonce and Jay-Z's personal lives, and they weren't flattering. That could have been the moment for a fiery social media rebuttal. But that's not how this machine works. Instead, the response came from their attorney, a clear, public statement rejecting the claims outright, printed by outlets like E! Online. No improvisation, no vague posting, just a legal voice putting the boundary on the record. It's a small but important signal. If you're going to address something, you do it with precision and you keep the family off stage. That legal-first approach is backed up by what I think of as Beyoncé's content discipline. You can scroll through her posts during any controversy and not find a single reactive jab. There are no subtweets, no inspired captions aimed at whoever's making noise in the press. Her feed is a timeline of work, tour updates, album drops, highly curated behind-the-scenes snippets that are about the art, not the gossip. And because she's consistent with it, her audience knows not to expect a sudden tell-all or confession in her stories. That's not the platform she's giving them. Then there's the performance angle. The easiest way to feed speculation is to slip something into a setlist or staging that feels like a reference to the scandal. A lyric swap here, a pointed gesture there. That's all it takes for the internet to run with it. But Beyoncé doesn't do that. If a song changes, it's because of the tour's creative flow, not to throw shade. If a monologue is cut, it's usually for timing, not because it contained some secret message she's now avoiding. Her silence on stage isn't an admission of anything. It's her policy. Silence keeps control. The same control extends to how her kids appear in public spaces. When Blue Ivy joins her on stage, it's not a casual moment. It's choreographed, rehearsed, and meant to exist in a creative context. Blue is there as part of the show, not to make a statement about whatever's trending in entertainment news. And when Rumi and Sir don't appear, it's almost always for reasons that are young and boring. School schedules, early mornings. The simple fact that they're young, this isn't coded confession through absence, it's parenting. Beyoncé's talked before, in interviews with The Independent and Essence, about wanting her children to have as normal a life as possible. She doesn't want them to be used as props in the public's ongoing narrative about her. So when fans decide that a skipped appearance means confirmation of a rumor, they're ignoring the years of consistency in how she operates. Her kids aren't in the spotlight unless it's on her terms. And her terms don't change just because someone else's scandal is dominating the headlines. If I were to put her approach into a visual, it would be a simple grid. On the do side, respond through legal channels when necessary, stick to your professional content, maintain creative focus on stage, and manage your children's public moments with care. On the don't side, don't post impulsively, don't embed cryptic digs in your work, don't feed speculation with sudden changes, and don't use your kids as shields or statements. That's the whole framework. Boring to some, but incredibly effective at keeping control. Fans sometimes mistake that control for coldness, like she's above it all, but I see it differently. I think it's a way of making sure that when the smoke clears, her family hasn't been dragged through something they never signed up for. It's not that she doesn't feel the pressure, it's that she refuses to let the pressure dictate her moves. So when people say the kids confirmed something about the Diddy situation, I can't help but think they're really just reacting to Beyoncé's refusal to change the playbook. The appearances, the absences, the silences, they're not new signals. They're the same signals she's been sending all along. Absence is policy, not a plot twist. It's funny in a strange way. how quickly people can turn a single old photo into proof of something much bigger. You've probably seen it happen. Someone finds a picture of two famous people at the same table in a nightclub from 2006, posts it online, and suddenly that image is being used as evidence that they're part of some shared scandal. It doesn't matter if it was just a networking event or a random industry party. Once it's out there, the photo becomes a piece of the puzzle people think they're solving. That's how guilt by proximity works. The story doesn't have to make perfect sense. All it needs is enough familiar faces in the same frame to convince people there's a deeper connection. With Diddy, the raw material for that kind of speculation is endless. He's been in the entertainment business for decades. New York clubs in the late 90s and early 2000s, big award show circuits, charity galas, high-profile business launches. In every one of those settings, cameras are flashing and people are mingling. Over time, that creates a massive library of images and clips, and anyone with an agenda can start stitching them together to form whatever narrative they want. But photos aren't the same as proof. Being in the same room doesn't mean being in the same scheme. That's why it's important to keep the record straight on what's actually documented and what's just implied. The documented part starts with those verified raids. March 25, 2024, when Homeland Security investigations searched Diddy's Los Angeles and Miami properties. Reuters and The Guardian both covered it, showing agents on site and explaining the legal context. A search warrant, approved by a judge, based on probable cause, but not proof of guilt by itself. From there, the official record moves into charges, a trial, and a split verdict. The Washington Post covered how the most serious racketeering and sex trafficking charges didn't stick, but 2 federal counts related to prostitution did. That's what landed Diddy in custody, with repeated bail requests denied and a sentencing date set for October 3, 2025. Those are the facts, the kind you can cite with dates, documents, and direct quotes from court proceedings. Now compare that to what happens when you throw an old photo into the mix. Let's say it's a shot of Jay-Z at an event with Diddy from 15 years ago. On its own, it's just a record of 2 major figures crossing paths in an industry where paths cross all the time. But once the civil suit from October 2024 hit, naming both men in a claim of assault from 2000, that old photo started showing up in rumor posts like it was corroborating evidence. It didn't matter that the suit was civil, not criminal, or that it was voluntarily dismissed with prejudice in February 2025. That with prejudice part is huge. It means the accuser can't refile the same claim again. Reuters and The Washington Post both reported the dismissal, and the coverage noted inconsistencies in the accuser's story, plus a recording that weakened her case. But by the time that information came out, the damage was done in the court of public opinion. The headline from the filing had already made its rounds, and the follow-up barely dented the rumor cycle. This is where Beyonce and Jay-Z's approach to pushback comes in. That televised moment on Piers Morgan's show, when guests started repeating unverified claims, was a perfect example of where they draw the line. Their attorney issued a public statement calling the remarks false, and E! Online ran the response. That's not about clapping back for entertainment value. It's about protecting your name when someone else is trying to fold you into a narrative you didn't sign up for. And here's the part that doesn't get enough attention. When people start linking the kids into this web, it crosses a very different line. In journalism, there's a basic rule. Minors are off limits in stories about adult allegations unless there's direct, verified involvement, and even then, their identities are often protected. The reason is simple. They can't consent to being part of that public conversation, and dragging them into it based on speculation is reckless. But that rule seems to disappear online, where anyone can post a theory without worrying about the fallout. If you wanted to visualize how these connections actually work, you could build a big interactive web. Put Diddy in the center, then add nodes for labels, producers, artists, award venues, and social events. Some connections would be marked work tie, collaborations, business deals, performances. Some would be social tie, parties, charity events, mutual friends. A tiny handful might be legal mention, tied to actual cases or investigations. Most of the lines would never touch the legal category at all. But when you strip away those labels online, it all blurs together into one messy conspiracy map, and suddenly everyone in the same orbit looks like a suspect. The trap of association math. It takes coincidence and turns it into implication. It assumes that proximity equals complicity, that networking equals conspiracy. And when it comes to the current wave of Diddy headlines, that trap has pulled in a lot of names, Beyonce's included, even when the official record shows no direct link at all. Chapter 7. What the kids confirmed. If you're honest about the evidence. I know the title of this whole thing sounds like it's promising a big reveal, like I'm about to tell you the kids slipped up in an interview or accidentally let something slip on stage. But here's the truth. If you're being honest about the evidence, the only thing they've confirmed is that Beyonce's boundary game is still unshakable. That's it. And honestly, in a world that's constantly trying to drag children into adult controversies, that's a bigger deal than it might sound. From everything we can actually verify, the family's privacy posture is still intact. Beyonce has been clear about this for years. In interviews with outlets like The Independent and Essence, her kids aren't content, and they're not pawns in the public narrative. She controls when, where, and how they're seen, and that control doesn't slip, even when the media storm is coming from all directions, whether it's Blue Ivy dancing on stage as part of a planned performance, or the twins being nowhere near a camera lens for months. It's deliberate. That's the first confirmation we have. Her rules about the kids haven't changed. The second is something we've all seen happen in real time. The internet's rumor machine will take any shift in family routine and turn it into a storyline. If Blue skips a stage appearance, it becomes proof of a falling out. If the twins aren't spotted at a tour stop, it becomes evidence of them being kept away from something. It doesn't matter that the real reason could be school schedules, fatigue, or simply not wanting to be there. The story people want is the one that gets told. Now, let's be just as clear about what has not been confirmed. There is no credible reporting, none, from any reputable outlet tying Diddy to any contact, incident, or involvement with Beyonce's children. Not in court documents, not in police records, not in investigative reporting. The idea that there's some hidden connection is pure speculation. And the same goes for the theory that the kids' appearances or absences are some kind of coded message about Diddy's case. That's reading tea leaves in an empty cup. If you wanted to break it down visually, you could take the 3 biggest viral claims I've seen about this and run them through a simple fact filter. First, the concert absence equals scandal claim. Source? None. Evidence? None. Corroboration? None. That one gets stamped unverified. Second, setlist changes as secret messages. Source? Fan speculation. Evidence? Just subjective interpretation. Corroboration? None. That's no evidence. Third, family is secretly involved. Source? No reputable outlet. Evidence? No documents, no video, no named witnesses. That's misleading. Once you filter it like that, the noise clears fast. What's actually happening is simple. The courts are moving on Diddy's charges, lawyers are filing motions, reporters are fact-checking their coverage, and Beyonce's family is staying firmly off the table. She's not changing her rules because someone else's name is dominating the headlines. If anything, she's doubling down. And maybe that's the real takeaway here. In an industry where so many people get swept up in scandals they're barely connected to, holding that line is rare. It means her kids don't have to deal with the fallout of stories they had nothing to do with. It means the focus stays where it belongs, on her work, not her family drama. So if you came here for a hidden confession, you're not going to get it. What you're getting is the one confirmation that actually matters. The boundaries are still up, the kids are still off limits, and until there's verifiable evidence to the contrary, everything else is just another theory bouncing around the feeds. And if you really think you've got something solid, an actual source from a major outlet or a court docket with relevant filings, drop it in the comments. Just skip the cropped screenshots of minors. If the proof exists, it should be able to stand on its own without pulling kids into the frame. Chapter 8. After the noise. A clear line for the next news cycle. When a story like this starts to fade from the trending lists, there's always a question hanging in the air. What happens next? For a lot of people, the temptation is to move on to the next scandal without looking back. But, if you're paying attention, there are still markers on the calendar and items in the legal process that will close certain doors and open others. The noise might die down, but the record keeps moving. The biggest checkpoint ahead is October 3, 2025. That's Diddy's sentencing date for the 2 federal counts related to prostitution, convictions that kept him in custody after the trial, with every bail request denied. The Washington Post's reporting has been clear on this. Unless something changes dramatically, he's not walking out before that date. That moment will matter for narrative closure, because until sentencing is done, the door is still cracked open for speculation about what the outcome might be. Once it's set, it becomes a matter of record, not prediction. Another thing worth watching is whether any new filings or civil suits come up that survive those early legal motions. The with prejudice dismissal in February 2025 taught us how quickly a claim can vanish if it can't hold up under scrutiny. Reuters covered how that civil suit naming Jay-Z and Diddy closed for good. No refile, no appeal on that claim. That's a lesson for the next round of headlines. A big filing doesn't automatically mean a long fight, and sometimes the paper trail ends almost as quickly as it starts. Here's my promise, and it's one I think should be standard for anyone covering this. If a reputable outlet, meaning a major publication or a primary court record, ever publishes material tying Diddy directly to Beyonce's family, I'll cover it. Not with hints, not with anonymous friend of a friend accounts, but with documents you can actually look at. Until then, the boundaries stand. The kids stay out of it, because dragging them in without proof isn't journalism. It's just rumor chasing. And before I put anything out there, I try to run it through a final test. Would I still run this story if the child in it were mine? If the answer's no, then it doesn't go in. That's not just about ethics, it's about keeping the focus where it belongs. There's no shortage of angles to cover without crossing that line. I'd end this with something visual, a source wall. It's not a list in tiny print you have to squint at, but a clear scannable layout of every key outlet we pulled from. Reuters, The Washington Post, ABC News, E! Online, Essence, The Independent. Places that have editors, standards, and the ability to retract if they get something wrong. That's how you keep a story grounded in reality instead of letting it drift into conspiracy territory. So here's the task for you if you're watching or reading this. Post one link, just one, that meets all 3 of these conditions. First, it's from a major outlet. Second, it cites a primary record, whether that's a court filing, an official statement, or a verified document. Third, it's not a commentary clip or opinion piece, it's reporting. If you can find something that fits, it belongs in the conversation. If not, then maybe it's time to let that particular rumor rest. Because after the noise, the only thing that matters is what can stand up in the light. And if we're going to keep talking about this, we owe it to ourselves and to the people actually in the headlines to stick to that standard.